Dispenser going up. Well, I guess that'll do.
Now, the panic attack rework, I was personally disappointed in. Basically, it's been buffed on every class except for the engineer, but it technically works better as a secondary. I mean, it used to be a good engineer weapon, so it's not really an engineer shotgun anymore. I mean, I'm sure that if I played with the panic attack more, I'd probably eventually just end up bumping it up, but I don't know. Every other shotgun except for the Thompson was a better option than the panic attack before the rework, and it looks to remain that way.
Have you ever been wrong? I've been wrong about some stuff from time to time, but mainly in the long-gone era of TF2 pushing updates every year, first impressions of a weapon, when it's been added or changed, generally becomes the solidified opinion that you guys hear from me. But first impressions are subject to change, because the more situations you get yourself into with a weapon, the more you begin to understand the intricacies of what the real upsides and downsides of the weapon actually are. Experience molds your views, one fight, one victory, one failure at a time. And over time, you truly begin to hone in on what you actually think about something. In an age of hot takes and first impression opinions being more visible than ever, it's sometimes difficult to discern the views that come from experience and the views that don't. So, I'd like to take a moment of your time to go back and re-examine an engineer weapon that I've talked about in the past, of which my opinion has changed. The Short Circuit. When the Short Circuit was heavily reworked in the Blue Moon update 2 years ago, a lot of people lost their minds, myself included. The Short Circuit, a little nub on the end of the engineer's arm, had suddenly changed from a little yellow taser to a concept straight from the realms of science fiction. My first impressions on this thing were compiled into a video and uploaded to my channel 3 weeks after I had been able to play with what was essentially a brand new weapon for the first time. Now, after 2 years of using the Short Circuit, I can confidently say that I've gotten a pretty decent grasp on the intricacies of the weapon. Experience molded my views, and the good news is, 90% of what I said in this video, I still agree with entirely. The Short Circuit is a subpar defensive option when maintaining a level 3 sentry gun nest, especially with the existence of the Wrangler shield. However, it provides the Battle NG subclass with an option to hold his own in 1v1 fights with projectile-based classes like Soldier and Demo Man. The Short Circuit isn't a get-out-of-rocket-jail free card like some people who clearly have never used it for more than a few minutes would be led to believe. It requires the engineer to pay attention to his metal, make snap decisions on if firing an energy ball is even worth it, and believe it or not, requires you to aim and time your shots effectively to achieve the desired effect. The metal cost of the Short Circuit is what makes the weapon balanced, and in the best case scenario, you can shoot it 3 times before you're a sitting duck. An inexperienced engineer can only use it to deal minimal damage while delaying the inevitable. Using the Short Circuit alongside the engineer's primary is where it shines, and when it comes to combining it with your weapons that require aim, only the skilled will succeed. However, where the Short Circuit ceases to be a tool that aids the engineer in 1v1 situations or initiating pushes through spammable chokes is within a very specific popular game mode in a very specific situation: pushing the payload cart. In my Short Circuit video, I barely touched on this weapon's effectiveness while using it next to the payload cart simply because I hadn't been in that situation enough to fully understand what might be broken about it. Simply put, the payload cart's infinite metal supply nullifies the entire balancing set of making the energy ball expensive. The engineer doesn't have to make a decision on if shooting the ball would be worth it, because it always will be. He can just keep doing it. Now, I want to be clear that I think that this only really becomes a problem when we're talking about the payload cart. The engineer can do practically the exact same thing on a dispenser, but because the dispenser can only hold up to 400 metal, which requires a lot of time to build up in the first place, his supply runs out quicker than you might expect. Not to mention, depleting your entire dispenser of metal just to delete some rocket spam for a few seconds is quite possibly one of the most wasteful things you can do as an engineer. But when it comes to the payload cart, wastefulness does not come into play. The cart's infinite supply of metal lobotomizes the engineer, and he can spam the energy ball to cheese the cap until someone with bullets can take care of him. This is where I think the short circuit could be nerfed, specifically in the case of the payload cart. In previous iterations, the short circuit would prevent you from getting metal from the payload cart and dispensers while it was active, forcing you to put it away in order to collect metal. I think this downside should make a return. Disallow the engineer from collecting metal from the payload cart and only the payload cart. I don't think it should prevent you from collecting it from dispensers, and it should apply while you have it equipped instead of only while it's active. Quickly switching between weapons would partially negate this downside, so I think it should be impossible to collect infinite payload metal altogether. Metal is already so abundant in other less risky areas that I don't really think it would affect the engineer all that much. And one more thing I would like to see changed about the short circuit is the visibility. This thing is big, bright, and you cannot see through it. Since this thing is the most effective when fired parallel to someone's line of sight, the short circuit often acts as a flashbang that makes both the user and the victim unable to see their target for a second. I personally think lowering visibility tends to make engagements more frustrating for everyone involved, so if the opacity of the energy ball was brought down to like 50%, I think that would be a positive change in general. They should also do that with the Pyro's Flames as well. Anyway, have you ever gone on a massive tangent?
Oh, fuck!
What in Sam Hill were you thinking?
The panic attack has been through a lot. It used to be pretty bad, then it was good, then it was alright, then it was really good, but in this transition, I think most people didn't bother taking notice because a lot of players, like myself, kind of enjoyed the weird Beggar's Bazooka shotgun, and maybe we were a little bitter that they took away a quirky concept and turned it into something much less interesting. But what I didn't realize until I had finally decided to give this thing a second chance over 2 years later is that while the panic attack was transformed from a multi-class shotgun that worked really well on one class into a multi-class shotgun that worked pretty alright on multiple classes, was that all this time I was forgetting something obvious. Shotguns are pretty powerful, man. Before we dive deeper, let's quickly go over the panic attack stats, starting with the fact that it fires 50% more bullets per shot. This means that while the stock shotgun shoots 10 bullets, this thing shoots 15. These 15 bullets always leave the barrel of the shotgun in a fixed spread pattern that looks like this, but we'll talk a lot more about that later. The panic attack itself deploys 50% faster, which makes it ideal for quick switching between your other weapons. The downsides are that despite the gun shooting more bullets, each individual bullet does 20% less damage. And as you fire the panic attack repeatedly, over time, the spread of these bullets grows wider and wider. So let's start with the quick switch thing, because despite it being the most noticeable thing when using the panic attack, I tend to believe that it's the least important to the engineer, albeit not entirely useless. See, when you think about how the panic attack is used on other classes, you can clearly see the synergy it provides when it's equipped in the secondary slot, in particular when it comes to the Pyro and the Soldier. The main source of damage these classes do comes from their primary weapons, which means that the panic attack switch speed comes into play every time someone needs to be finished off, when you're out of rockets, or if the enemy is retreating out of your effective range. The panic attack works quite well as a finisher because if used in this way, you'll only have to fire the thing once or twice, effectively nullifying one of the weapon's major downsides. So when you equip it as a primary on the engineer, you'll probably think, well, the switch speed won't really matter because you don't really combo things as Engie. And that's kind of true, but who said comboing things was the only use that you could get out of the faster switch speed? Actually, the engineer who's doing his job won't always have his shotgun out. He'll be smacking a bunch of stuff with a wrench. With the exception of Demo Knight and maybe Spy, the engineer is the class that will probably have his melee weapon out for most of the game. So switching to your shotgun actually happens more than you might realize, and a lot of the time, brevity is of the most importance when you're already busy slapping everything in sight.
He had a panic attack out on the next frame and then I died.
You can also abuse the quick switch to make other Battle Engie loadouts more effective, such as pairing it with the pistol for softening up your target while closing the distance, or using it with the short circuit to engage 1v1s with soldiers and demo men. It can also be pretty easy to assume that because Engineer will likely be firing his shotgun repeatedly as his primary source of direct damage, the panic attack's incremental spread should come into play all the time, and would generally be a worse option compared to the stock. But this is where actually using the thing tends to prove that theory wrong, because especially after Blue Moon came along and cut the maximum spread almost in half, the difference is hardly noticeable past close range, which is the distance every shotgun should be effective at anyway. Besides, it's actually pretty easy to reset the cooldown. All you gotta do is wait until you start the reload animation, or quickly switch between weapons. And sometimes the increased spread can be beneficial if you're just going for long-range chip damage, because at a certain point, the bullets cover a pretty large area. Quick aside, you might be wondering why you would even want to chip chip damage someone with a shotgun? Well, honestly, if you're in a situation where you should probably be pointing your gun somewhere more important, it's not that impactful. But chip damage actually can have lasting effects on the enemy team just beyond irritating them. There is a hidden mechanic on the medigun where you can heal someone faster if they haven't taken any damage for 10 seconds. So even if you do like 3 damage to someone across the map, they won't be able to be efficiently healed right away. So yeah, if you can see someone, you might as well shoot them, even though you're doing some mosquito type crap. Back to the panic attack though, because the individual bullets do less damage, that basically means that at medium to long range, you're going to be doing less damage compared to the shotgun. But if you're actually trying to kill someone, why would you do that? You got to get up close and personal to be effective with every shotgun, and the panic attack at that range actually does significantly more damage, up to 108 in fact, 16% more than the stock, and even slightly more than the Scout's scattergun. Now, in order to take advantage of the maximum damage that the panic attack puts out, you really gotta get within breath-smelling distance of your enemy, which can be pretty risky, but oh so rewarding if you can play it right. But even if you play it relatively safer and stand at the intended effective range of a shotgun away from your target, you'll still end up doing more damage than stock simply because there are 5 more bullets hitting your enemy, despite those bullets doing less damage on their own. This means that you can reliably 3-shot a heavy, 2-shot a soldier, and even secure kills on classes that might not have died without another round from the stock shotgun. The clear situation in which the panic attack actually begins to do less damage in comparison to the stock is when you fire it from medium range or further, which is a fair trade-off in my opinion because, like I said, getting close to your target is almost always where shotguns are going to be the most deadly. However, despite the panic attack clearly being the better option at close range, I'd argue that the increased damage or the faster switch speed is only secondary to the impact of this one stat. The panic attack fires a fixed shot pattern, which hands down is the best thing about the gun because of one overlooked feature of casual mode TF2: random bullet spread.
The bullets go wherever the hell they want. You can't control bullets? You think you can tell bullets what to do?
In Valve's official servers, a hidden stat is applied to every shotgun and every scattergun in the game. Most of the bullets go in random directions within an invisible cone. This means that every time you fire your shotgun, there is a chance your bullets can hit a target more or less than the shot that you fired before it.
9.
Simply put, shotguns fired at anything other than point-blank range have a tendency to do a random spread of damage. The argument for why this is not an ideal concept for a first-person shooter like TF2 has been discussed to death by everyone, including myself. But as long as this mechanic remains in vanilla TF2, the panic attack benefits from it immensely. Because the panic attack always fires in a fixed pattern, even at medium range where the damage is statistically lower than the shotgun, the consistency of the damage makes it easier for skilled players to plan ahead and use their experience to their advantage. There's nothing more frustrating than shooting your shotgun, failing to kill someone who you swore could have died all because your bullets decided to go somewhere slightly different this time. As a result, any time you are playing on a server with random bullet spread enabled, you're largely leaving your shotgun damage up to a dice roll. The panic attack removes this randomness from the equation completely, and in my experience, reliable consistency trumps slightly more power every time. So here we are. It only took me a couple years to wise up to this thing, but my overall opinion boils down to this. When I'm playing in casual mode, I automatically will choose the panic attack over the shotgun simply because the fixed spread is so impactful. However, when I'm playing in competitive mode or on community servers where random bullet spread is disabled, I tend to lean more towards using the stock shotgun because I'm able to experience the best of both worlds, consistency and higher damage. However, if I happen to be playing on a map where close quarters engagements are more common, such as Dust Bowl or Upward Last, the panic attack is almost always a better choice. It's also the superior weapon to use when equipping the short circuit, since it makes projectile class 1v1s slightly more efficient. So yeah, for a side grade, the benefits come into play for the engineer quite a lot more than I was expecting, and in fact has solidified my opinion that the panic attack is generally a better shotgun in most situations. But if you'd like to avoid using the panic attack, or maybe even having a panic attack, you can come and play on my community servers. I have random bullet spread disabled there. You can visit uncledane.com/servers to see the full list of server locations, and if you want to get a cool hat, I got this cool hat that says BAP on it. It's kind of like the Gap Athletic logo. It's kind of a parody of that. Yeah, I don't really know if that reference was made very clear before. I mean, I think it's pretty good. All right, bye.
I like the name of your panic attack, by the way. It's funny.